I promised to talk about, optimizing online campaigns and personalization and all that. Before I get into that, I figured I'll look at some offline campaigns first. So this was an offline campaign that was performed by Napoleon in 1812. And this beautiful infographics was actually drawn by a French gentleman called Charles Minard in 1869, I think. And he basically was an engineer who was very much into visualization as well. And this with his immersion, this is the flow diagram that he came up with. And interestingly, so what this shows is this was Napoleon's troop in the beginning of this campaign in Lithuania, I think. And the size of that army was about 420,000 people. So that's where they started when they had the great idea to invade Russia. And they took about a 1,000-kilometer journey all the way to Moscow. And as you can see on the way there, they did encounter some setbacks. So by the time they got there, and this size is now just 100,000 people. Of course, by the time they got there, actually Moscow was evacuated, so there were no actual people there, only the prisoners that were let loose, and they burned up the whole city, and there was really not much point for them to actually occupy it. So they at that point decided, okay, let's go back now, and the 100,000 people started going back, and this here actually shows the temperature. The bottom point here is about minus 40 degrees Celsius, so on the way back they did encounter some severe winter, which wasn't helping the people getting home. And they got rejoined by some of their other troops, and by the time they got back, they had about 10,000 people left. So that's a pretty sad story told in a nice infographic. The executive summary is right there. It's a 2.4% survival rate. You could think of it as a conversion rate of sorts. Okay, so there's nothing new about this kind of storytelling, I suppose. And I obviously have no such high level of infographics visualization skills as this gentleman did, but I try to do my best. This is it. Right. So what I'm trying to show here is a typical online store where people come in, they look at some products, they browse around, they add some of their items to the cart, and eventually some of them end up buying that. So what do you think? What is the conversion rate from just browsing around and actually what percentage of visits actually end up in a purchase? What would be?
1%.
1%, 2%, 5%, someone said 5%. Okay.
0 point.
0 point. Okay, so not too bad guesses, and actually a very similar number that we have seen to Napoleon's campaign. It's a pretty tragic in some sense. Most visitors actually just come in, they browse around, and very few of them add something to the cart. And obviously that action does indicate a pretty strong interest in actually buying something, but even then, the majority of those people don't end up buying it. So that's sort of the set state of how things happen in an online store for the most part. Now, let's look at some of the details of what is actually happening here. What I plotted here is basically the probability of a visitor converting based on how many times they have been to this website. So we have looked at a bunch of e-commerce stores from our clients, and this is the typical pattern. So what you can see on the first, you get some kind of conversion rate, and as somebody keeps coming back, there's a higher chance of them actually doing something there. Now, of course, this is the conversion probability, but there is less and less people in these buckets. So in terms of revenue, this actually looks like this. So on the first visit, you get a significant chunk of your revenue from there, and then the returning visitors, obviously, there's less and less people who are returning 10 times to make a decision. But still, it's very important to look at those people who are actually returning to your site, because they still provide 2/3 of the total revenue. So yes, the first visit is 1/3, but still the subsequent ones are quite a significant part of the entire store. Okay, so what can we do with this observation or insight? So the the idea is that you know the more and more about these people as they keep coming back. So they actually did spend some time looking around, browsing products, and you can use this information to help them in some way, because it's actually very valuable. And oops. Okay, so so the idea is that we can basically look at the behavioral patterns of all these people and kind of try and find patterns in this kind of behavioral data, like what they've been looking at, adding to their cart, buying, and find relationships and find similar people to your behavior and use their activity as some kind of personalized recommendations. So that idea is not particularly novel or new. There's several well-known applications of that. So sort of everyone knows in-store recommendations. Amazon has been doing this for quite a while now. Whenever you go to a page, you can see related products, you can see personalized recommendations and all that. And of course, that is mostly fed by this kind of behavioral data. You can of course use these personal recommendations of relevant items in email campaigns as well, so you can personalize your newsletters, send emails to people who abandon your shopping cart and so forth. But of course the big limitation on email campaigns is that you actually have to know their email address, which is not the case for most of your visitors. So only a small percentage of those are actually registered customers that you can reach in an email. So okay, so now we have to realize that okay, people in store, yes, we can reach them, but they actually leave. In email campaigns, we can only reach a fraction of them. So what else can we do? Well, there's advertising, of course, and that's how you can reach them when they are on other websites, when they left from your store. And so the idea in personalized display ads is to use this information that you already figured out based on their visits, and to somehow leverage that on other websites where you can reach these people with personalized messaging. So this is how this looks like in practice. So these are various campaign examples that we do, from used car sales or electronic store or real estate or job listings and that kind of thing. And these are all displayed on various websites. And I wanted to take a look at a particular example. This was for an electronic store displayed in a major news portal. And this was their classic ad. It's actually not animated here, but this is a well-done creative, nicely animated. There was a couple of screens of products and nice marketing messaging, and so it's a pretty decent campaign. And we replaced it, or actually A/B tested it against a much plainer looking but personalized display ad. And okay, so let's first just take a look at an interesting observation even about the regular ad with the flash banner they had. This is basically the number of visits coming out from that campaign, and I broke it up into people who are new visitors to the store, so they haven't been there previously, and that's how many visits we get from those kind of people. And we get roughly, actually a little more visits from people who have been to that store. Now, the reason why this is interesting is because on that news portal, it's actually only about 10% of the traffic who has been to that website. So what this already tells you is that those people who have been to that store have already a much higher chance of actually going back. Okay, so what happens if we start optimizing this, and how can we actually optimize this kind of thing? So let's look at the new visits first. Those are the people who have not been to the store yet. So we don't really know anything about their personal tastes in terms of what they're interested in, what kind of books or electronics they might be looking for. But we can still optimize it because we, on the other hand, have a very good picture of what's currently popular in the store, what has been converting well in the last couple of days, and we can start putting those offers even in the non-personalized display ads. And of course, the interesting part where you can actually start doing something about their personal interests. So you have been to that store, one visit, you looked at a couple of items, and we already know that, okay, so you looked at these 5 cameras or job listings or whatnot, and we can give you more offerings that are similar to those that you have been looking at, but you have not seen them previously. And that technique actually is super effective, as we have seen here and in many other campaigns. I also tried to do a similar breakdown of this over time. Now again, so the previous slide was an absolute number of visits. This here is a click-through rate broken down by how much time has passed since they last visited the website. Okay, so you can see that even with the regular ad, this is the increase I was talking about. So if somebody has been to that website that same day, they clearly have a very strong interest in actually buying, and you can reach them and make them come back even with your plain messaging. But of course, if you personalize that gives you a much better story. And the personalization actually becomes even more relevant. So you can see the difference here is even larger as time passes. Because people, have been to the store, they might have wanted something, but they kind of forgot about it, and you kind of need to remind them and give them some useful offerings. And you can see that this effect actually, sort of tapers off over time as they actually lose interest. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover very quickly, actually. And this. What has this got to do with Napoleon's campaign? Well, really, and the good news is that in the online setting there is not too many human lives at stake, so that's good. But still, the numbers I've shown were still very low and very sad. So I think there might be more effective ways of addressing the people shopping around the web. So that's what we try to do with this kind of personalization. So that's the brief introduction of this, and thank you for your attention. And of course, I'm open to questions. Did it make sense?
Just have a question. What is the scarab ad? What that means? What is the secret of it? Why it has so high CTR?
Yeah, so the question is basically what's the secret? There's not that much of a secret, just a lot of hard work that went into it, mostly building machine learning models. So basically what we do is we collect traffic information both on the media sites and on the web stores, and we collect behavioral data such as this anonymous visitor looked at these 5 products and ended up buying those, and we have millions of records like that. And what we do is we process this information and build various relationship matrices out of this that sort of identify relationships between individual products, visitors and products, and so forth. And that's where really, this is basically the processing data at this scale is somewhat challenging. So the fundamentals are not particularly novel. There's some interesting research that we did into some subsets of the recommendation problem, but really I think 80% of the work is actually building a system that can scale to this level of traffic and still calculate these kind of relationships very quickly. So the user experience in this case is actually completely real time. So if you load up a website that showing this ad, and then you in another tab you look at a couple of products and you reload this ad page, then it already contains a very different set of items than it has in the last few seconds. So making it scalable like that is sort of the hard part, I suppose. Yes,
so if I understood that correctly, you collect the data, and for example, I am your customer, I am a company providing a shop, and then I would like to get new traffic or to come back the old ones somehow. So I hire you and you create a kind of personalized banners which must be shown but in different pages. Am I right? And the people seeing them would tend to go to visit the page more. Is it so?
Yes, that's basically the idea. So we can deliver these ads either on zones that you have purchased directly, or for example right now we're integrating with the Google Display Network, so we can deliver ads there, and so that's basically the approach here.
So something like, for example, I know that it's just not the same, but you can track from the cookies and so on, all those things like, for example, he was interested into hi-fi or something, and then if letting him come back, then this would be shown directly to him, like we recommend this to you, or is it something like that too, or that's different story.
Yeah, it's bit, so there's one element to this, which is the retargeting part, is that if you have been to the site and we know something about you, then obviously there is some knowledge about your interest. But even for people who have not been there, we optimize the ads in a more traditional contextual targeting and all that. So we figure out that on this given website, media site, what are the products that people generally convert on. So with this approach, it's not just the annoying ad that keeps coming back after you've been to a website, but it also is reaching new customers.
Okay, so with other words, you create new banners and the customer has to buy where to show them.
That's basically the case. I mean, we're actually working towards making this. So we use existing display networks such as, for example, Google or other networks to deliver the ads. So we ourselves don't want to buy ad spaces, but we can actually help our client reach out to a larger audience. And we also actually have a strategy for figuring out which of our advertisers to show at a given point. So that makes these ads even more effective because we can figure out whether this individual is more interested in your electronics store or the bookstore or job listing or real estate, so which advertiser to pick, which makes this even more effective and of course more relevant for the user. So for example, there was one experiment where we put this real estate listing ad which shows you personalized recommendations on a weather portal, and actually what we have seen based on A/B test is that people come back to the weather portal more often just to look at this ad because it's actually so helpful for them to, because there was, this particular client did not put personalized recommendations in his own website, so on his own website they couldn't actually get the personal recommendations, but when they went to the weather website they did see something that was relevant. So that was interesting because to us it was surprising that that's why they actually visit the weather site more often. which kind of means that these are, in the end, ads are traditionally very low conversion and very annoying and just noise for most people. But if you can actually put relevant content in there that is helpful, then people would actually be happier to look at them and click them. So that's really the secret here.
Okay, but if, for example, those people doesn't know the page, which is your customer, so you are showing the ad to completely new people, they don't have any idea about it, so they don't know what they want on the page. So what's the key there? Because you are showing ads for the new audience. They don't know about the e-shop you are talking about, and you have to show them something which is better than the original banners.
Yes.
To let them go there. But if they don't know the product, it's rather hard to guess what would they be attracted.
Well, in that case, you can safely assume, so for people who have not expressed any particular interest, you can safely assume that they are like most people, and you can give them, first of all, popular products, so basically things that have been selling extremely well. So let's say this company has a super hot offer, a great deal on the iPad, and that's what everybody's buying in the last few days, and perhaps that's where dynamically figuring out that's what we want to advertise today. And in addition to that, you can, and this is what I meant by the contextual targeting part, is that if you figure that, okay, we're advertising on a website where there's mostly, let's say, women visitors, and they're not interested in the, I don't know, drilling machine power tools, but they're more interested in, I don't know, MP3 players, then even without knowing them personally, that's a pretty safe assumption that on this website, on this page, this is what we should be showing. So,
yeah, but should your customer know by himself that not to show on the women's pages?
Yeah, but when you have hundreds of thousands of products, let's say, then this becomes, and you would want to recalculate this daily, like what's currently selling well. That's not something that your marketing team would do. And in fact, you would, like with the flash banner, the process would be that, okay, let's ask my designer guy to put this new image up there, and that's our new campaign. And you don't want to do that every day. And this actually does this in, adaptively. And that's, I think. Yeah.
I'd like to ask if I'm going to the site from one computer and then another. Does the site know that maybe from my iPhone? Does the site know that I am still the only one person, or it is like three different users?
Yeah, so the question is that if you use multiple devices, do we know if it's the same
Yeah,
person? To a certain extent we might. So fundamentally we use anonymous cookies, so there's no personal identification information. However, when you have an online store where you, for example, recognize logged in customer, then we know that anonymous ID as well. So if the store thinks that you are user 123 and you logged in from your phone and on that, then we can of course link this up and we can link it up with your past purchases that you made last year and so forth. So in that sense, it's still anonymous, but we can, if you of course logged in, so otherwise we don't try to, you know.
Yeah. And if I can have the next question, I would like to ask, okay, you have so many sites where you have this kind of recommendation. Do you use the information across all sites, or it is just from one store separate from another store? If you are building some kind of user model from all of the sites that the user is visiting, or?
Yes, that's a very good question. So basically the question is whether we use, we just look at the store's traffics individually, or do we combine them in some way? And the answer is that, of course, we make sure that whenever a client, or let's say a major store shares data with us, then we only use that data to benefit them. That's sort of the main observation, because you wouldn't want them use their data to make recommendations in a different store, because that would be really hurting them. So that we don't do, but we do figure out user models across all these channels, and for example, we use it to figure out which of the advertisers to show even. So if you have been to 5 of these stores, then we would use this information across that which of those is probably the most interesting for you. So yeah, we do track the user across all these, but we don't try to screw our customers.
Thank you. I have a question. You are tracking your customers a lot. Are there any legal issues like Google hacked in your business, and how it's affecting your business? Like, are there some people which are complaining, or it has negative impact on your business?
Yeah, so the question is of privacy. So as I mentioned, we don't collect any personally identification information. So no email addresses, no IP addresses, no. And if you clear your cookies, it's all gone. And of course, you see in one of those boxes there's a little eye in the lower right corner, which can inform the customer, and that's where they can also opt out from this whole tracking. So to answer your question, no, there is no legal issue, because most of those legal issues come up first of all when you start collecting personal identification information, names, IP addresses, that sort of thing. So that is something that we really don't want to do to avoid all these legal issues. And of course, the opt-out capability is another important aspect of this. But clearly there is a whole debate around this, and various countries have slightly different opinions on this. So we'll see where sort of things will land. But I think so first of all, it's totally legal to do this, and second, I think it's very useful. So if you're a customer, would you rather see the generic ad for crap that you just don't care about at all, or would you rather see something that's actually somewhat relevant to you? But probably the answer is the more relevant wins out in the end, but if you don't want to do that, you can still opt out, of course.
Would it help to you if you collect the IPs as well, but you don't do it because it's legal issues?
So we do collect IPs for a short period of time, just so that we can track down fraud or that sort of bugs or issues in the system of data collection, but that gets discarded in a short period of time, and we don't process it at all. And it wouldn't really help us that much, because we do issue persistent cookies for these visitors, so that's pretty much good enough.
Thank you.
I also have a question. How difficult is to integrate your tracking code to some e-commerce site, or also the display network site, for example, in comparison to industry standard things like Google Analytics?
Yeah, so the difficulty level is roughly on the same level as integrating analytics. So basically the data collection, you just put in our script, copy paste basically, and set up some event notifications to let us know that okay, this was a view, an add to cart, or a checkout event. So that usually doesn't take long at all, just maybe a couple of hours for a developer. And then depending on the context, we of course need to have a good understanding of the product catalog. So the typical approach is that we just regularly get some kind of export in a CSV or XML format from our clients. This is the same kind of product information they would send to price comparison sites. So this is not usually a big challenge because they already have things like this. But for example, for some sites, we automatically crawl the website and figure it out that way. But usually it's more accurate to have an explicit export. And in the export, of course, they can tell us that, okay, product number 123 has this image, this label, that price, and all that information that we can use to render the actual ads.
Thank you. Another question. Does your client has an option to somehow modify what do you display, or is it just your scripts? For example, if the client wants to push this one particular product, even if it's not selling so well.
So our general approach is that we don't recommend doing that precisely because of the reason that why are you trying to sell something that's not selling well? Then okay, maybe you have leftovers that you want to push out, but then usually in these cases they just lower the price and make it somehow more sellable actually. But yeah, we do have some methods of tweaking these recommendation models. For example, a typical example is that a company that sells a wide range of products, and one of those categories is sexual health products, and they just feel like they don't want to advertise those products because I don't know. But yeah, so typically business rules like this would be incorporated, but generally we advise against tweaking it because that kind of defeats the whole purpose.
And last question, did you already do something also in our Slovakian market?
Yeah, so here, for example, Martinus is a client of ours, and they use our in-store recommendations.
Okay, thank you.